The fact that AI can do it makes everything a little suspicious. We really do have a crisis of legitimacy. We don't believe what we see. Anything in the past that you wanted to do to persuade people, now you can personalize it. Advertising, propaganda. It's a sticky problem.
Hello, and welcome to Working with me, Dan Doriani, hosting a podcast where we explore faith, work, culture, and the way believers can make a difference in their corner of the world. My guest today is Jonathan Barlow, a man I've known for a number of years as a man of gifted intellect. And Jonathan, you are currently the Associate Director of the Data Science Center at Mississippi State University, which is a university-wide entity because everybody studies data science. And you also teach in that field. You've got an interesting background. I mean, it's not obvious how you got to that place in life. 15 years in industry, but you got a BA in philosophy and political science. You got an MDiv, meaning you studied theology, Master of Divinity. Got a PhD in historical theology, which leads very logically to data science and cutting edge technology. Can you just give us a summary of how on earth you went from political science and theology and history to your current calling?
Well, it started in college. I started out in computer engineering. And then I took a philosophy class and I took a creative writing class. And one day I was in a lab and I looked around and everyone was doing something with a circuit. And I just had this feeling that these guys have this covered. That's the feeling that I had. So I decided to pursue the humanities. I think my cover story was that I was going to be in the legal profession, but I started really being interested in philosophy. I ended up going to Covenant Seminary after graduating with a philosophy degree. Now, the whole time I was in school, though, I worked at the Engineering Research Center, and I was programming, the latest technologies. We were doing visualization of scientific data, so soil data, water data, and it was a wonderful experience. So when I graduated,
university here would be Washington University. Is that right?
was at Mississippi State University.
Oh, Mississippi State University.
Yes.
Got it. Okay. Yeah.
So that's where I was, and I also got married in college and everything. So I just decided that maybe my future wasn't in engineering, and so but I was always very interested in, and I really enjoyed programming, and it was something that I thought I was good at. And so then when I went to seminary, I kind of worked my way through by working for internet companies. The internet came out while I was the World Wide Web came out while I was in college. In fact, Netscape IPO was on my honeymoon. We woke up the next morning and Netscape had their IPO that Monday morning. Wow. But I ended up working for kind of some of the beginning internet companies and, doing, shopping carts and websites for people, for churches, for all kinds of people.
The short answer is you've been doing this your whole life, even if you've been studying other things, which is one way to say it. This is a faith and work podcast. So we talk about how people use their faith at work. So in a sense, you were practicing everything that has to do with IT and writing code and all that sort of thing while studying ethics. And that's really what you do now in terms of your unique contribution within Christendom is you try to ask and answer questions like, what's the ethics of AI? What are the implications for a doctrine of humanity, anthropology, or what are the ethics of sucking up vast amounts of information, maybe not with the author's permission? So God has led you to do both at once. Does that sound right? You've got a dual path that converged?
That's right. Thinking about, theological anthropology, that's what are humans from the perspective of one's theology. That question is very relevant now because people are asking the question, what makes humans unique? How are we like AI? How is AI like us? How are we different? So I feel like it's the preparation I didn't know that I needed, but I guess God knew that I needed this preparation.
And I'm kind of inclined to say things like I know the difference between AI and a person is very clear. People can feel pain and they can feel emotions, but of course some people may say that someday AI will feel pain and feel emotions, and they'll get a skeleton with skin on it like the Terminator, and all those things are up for debate, I suppose, at some level or other today.
That's right. We can discuss the Terminator. That's usually where the conversation goes, is toward the Terminator. I try to stay on the sunny side of the street, but I definitely recognize that that's one of the things that people are usually interested in is the probability of doom, as they say.
Well, exactly, and we'll get there. AI has been around in some form or other for a number of years, maybe 15 years. It's had some significant capacities, but for the last 2 years, you almost can't escape a conversation about AI, where it's going, what it's going to do to society. Why is this the moment of AI?
Yes, well, it's probably because of generative AI. So in 2022, ChatGPT suddenly was an easy way to interact with AI. You could ask it a question. It was a bit like a Google search where you simply typed in a prompt and received an answer. And it was very surprising because the answers were good. You could ask for, help me write a love letter to my wife. In the genre of of an outlaw cowboy song, and you would get something passable that sounded like a Johnny
Right.
Cash song, and it
Yeah.
was well written and in good grammar. So it really astounded people. It was sort of one of those all of a sudden moments where everything came together to really show people what was possible.
That's true. So I'm going to say that passable is maybe the key word for me. I've read, I found a little bit of information about you, and you allow your students, you teach somewhat in data science, you allow your students to use AI in the preparation of their papers, but you say, don't you dare pass off AI because we're the best baloney detectors. You gave about 10 words for baloney. I call AI generated documents flat.
Okay,
Meaning there's, a human paper will be clunky and then it'll soar. And it's very uneven. It goes up and down like a graph, but not so. Even it's just like the stock market or something, just irregularly up and down. And you say, I mean, this whole paper was worth this paragraph. That doesn't happen with AI. It's all sort of pretty good. It's all C plus
that's right.
material.
That's right. It's very good for procedural documents, for budget justifications, for mission statements, and that sort of thing. But I think you're right. There's a rhetorical risk that a human writer takes in light of aesthetics, in light of trying to create something beautiful that people would like to read. I like the word "soar" there, and so I do think that right now, I do believe that it's possible to prompt AI to some of these generative technologies. You can prompt them and say use soaring rhetoric, and you might get something that sounds a little bit like a TED talk. But if you're looking for brilliance, that is something that I've yet to see a really brilliant example. But I do think you're right that it is passable. That for a lot of documents that occupy people's time and keep them from writing soaring documents, it's great because it can do all the procedural things for you. But you really have to spend your time on the rhetoric and the beauty.
Yeah, for example, I think in some place you say an AI can create a course syllabus
Yes, that's right.
because
Well,
you have to fill in all the standard stuff about absences and when the exams are and so forth.
yeah, and a classic example is giving me a list of all the Tuesdays and Thursdays between this
Yes.
date and this date. And instead of sitting down with a calendar, it can not only create it, but it can show me the code that it used to create it. So they write software, and I can
Mhm.
look at the software and verify that it used appropriate means to calculate the dates. So
Mhm.
that kind of thing could save me 2 hours per course per semester, and I teach 4 courses per semester. So
Right.
right there, that's a day of my life. So it's pretty good.
Yeah, it's outstanding. And it can do things like help you plan a vacation. It may not get it exactly right, but you say, I want a moderately stressful hike on day one, a high demand on day three, extremely high on day five, and then day six, something light. And they'll do that for you. And
That's
you'll
exactly
give it a
right.
50-mile radius, and it'll do about as well as any ordinary person could do, except for the person who really knows all the regions that you're hiking in. Yes?
That's right. Yeah, I think you can think of it as a first draft machine. It will create a first draft of most things that you're interested in, and then you can probe deeper, make it better. But it's passable.
Yeah. So if it's the case that AI does all these things pretty well, why are people worried about AI? What is the big concern? Let's just do doom scenarios first. About 3 years ago on this podcast, I did have another AI person, and almost my first question was, so just let us all feel comfortable that Rise of Machines is not going to happen. And he said, well, not now. And then I pressed him. I said, what do you mean not now? And he said, well, maybe 15 or 20 years. I said, 15 or 20 years, that's kind of close in the overall scheme of things. And he said, yeah, that's one of the reasons why I'm in AI is to prevent doom scenarios. How likely is it that we're going to face doom, that the machines will decide to save humanity by destroying humanity or something along those lines?
Yes, I do, and I'm hesitant to put a number on it, like a probability of doom, but I don't think it's non-zero. I do think there are some concerns. The main one would be that there are resources that are needed to solve most problems. Like think about energy. You need energy to drive to the supermarket. You also need energy to wage a war, and you need energy to mine minerals. So if there's a situation in which we compete with AI to achieve some goal, and it takes resources that we need for another purpose, that does risk human life. And so the idea, a classic example might be you're passing through an asteroid belt, and the computer that controls the spaceship diverts the life support systems to the shields or to the maneuvering part, and then that's great for the ship's integrity, but it's not so good for the humans who need to breathe. And so that's the idea. A competition for resources might be a reasonable one.
So what you're saying is this is not likely to be malice on the part of the machines. It's likely to be the fact that we created improperly thorough logarithms?
Yes,
is that what you're
saying? Right. Well, it's kind of like a genie. You ever see the classic genie stories? You ask the genie for world peace, and they make everyone disappear except for you. That's the classic genie story. So I think a lot of times the people who really promote the doom idea, they do treat AI a bit like a genie. They're just worried we can't craft a goal clear enough that if it were pursued with a lot of intelligence, it wouldn't result in some competition for resources that would not benefit humanity. So I think that's the essence of the argument, and that's a little bit more realistic argument than that they'll decide that humans are a cancer or go after us because they don't think humans are very beneficial for the earth or something,
or beneficial for their ongoing use of the power grid.
That's right. They might prevent us from turning them off or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. That's unlikely is what we're saying.
I think it's less likely. Yes,
but not zero. I don't hear you saying zero, but extremely unlikely.
Right.
So let me ask you this question. Do you think artificial intelligence is a misnomer? Is it actually intelligence, or is it something that mimics intelligence by using probabilities?
That's interesting. Well, the kind of mistakes that AI makes, they seem very familiar to me, misquoting a citation or making up something. These sounds a lot like the humans I know. So there are a lot of mistakes right now that already feel very human-like. I do think that there are different forms of intelligence. I mean, think about plants. They exhibit, the ability to move around things. Animals have a certain intelligence. Humans have a kind of intelligence. And then if you have a theological kind of perspective on the world, angels have intelligence. And then finally, the divine persons have intelligence of some sort. And all these are different kinds of intelligences. So I'm willing to grant that machines could have a form of intelligence worthy of that name. But I don't think it's a misnomer.
Yeah. So, but it might be at the level of more like a worm. They've done things like put worms in a tea maze, and to the right is food, their favorite food. To the left is sandpaper. And after 1,000 repetitions, the worm will still turn toward the sandpaper one time out of 3. I mean, they're really stupid. But it is a kind of intelligence because 2 times out of 3, they do turn toward the food. If you define intelligence minimally enough, you can say artificial intelligence is intelligence.
That's true. And the old joke is that artificial intelligence is what computers can't do yet. That's the old joke. And so every time, computers do something amazing, we just define that. And, kids will grow up with that capability and never know a day when AI didn't tell you the best route to take between point A and point B. Yeah. But all of us with atlases remember that that's quite an achievement to direct us from point A to point B. And so we stop thinking of that as intelligence.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's a helpful way of putting it. Now, one of the things you talk about in terms of the ethics of AI is, you talk about a number of things in your article that you wrote for By Faith magazine, one of the wonderful pieces on this topic. But you do point out that there are some ethical issues with AI. One of them is consumption of resources. They take a lot of energy.
That's right.
Another one is sucking up the work of authors who are getting no credit for it. But maybe the most important one, you can comment on any of them, but the one that seems most important to me is the possibility of spin or bias in AI. Now, we would say it's inevitable that AI has bias because people have bias. So, for example, can AI be unbiased? The answer has to be no. I'll let you answer it yourself. But is it only biased in the sense, this is your question, is it only biased in the sense that it decides what information we'll get? That's a kind of bias. It just says this is the piece, this is most germane for you. It's not trying to promote a leftist ideological agenda on, marketplaces or something. And then, of course, does AI get programmed to take a position on controversial topics? And let's say make the case for euthanasia sound very positive, and anybody who opposes it is defective in some way. Elaborate on your view of bias in AI.
Sure. I think if you start at the first, when AI is first trained, it vacuums up a lot of content on the web. So the bias would creep in there by the content itself being biased. Now, if you vacuum up a sufficiently large amount of material and the material represents human society well, then you're going to probably have the kind of bias that we have as a collective society, which means we probably cancel each other out. We kind of fall somewhere in the middle. The second layer of training then is called reinforcement learning through human feedback. And it could be humans interacting with the AI and saying, hey, that's a great answer, or that's not a good answer. But also could be examples of question and answer pairs. Here's how we'd like for you to answer a question. Now that could relate to safety. You could ask an AI, hey, how do I make this particular kind of poison? And maybe the AI will respond and has learned to respond from reinforcement learning. Well, hey, I don't really want to answer that question. That could be dangerous for you. Whereas maybe the vacuuming up the internet, the recipe is somewhere for that poison, and it could actually answer that. So that's one of the ways that a good kind of bias creeps in. We bias it from giving, biased answers.
Detrimental information.
Detrimental information. That's right.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one part. I guess the other part is that you could use AI to create a lot of propaganda. And so that's another, danger that kind of relates to this. But I'll go back to the bias part. So yes, I do think that they are biased. And if you use the different search engines, you're going to get a different level of intervention in the output. So if you use Anthropic, Anthropic is a company, and they have an engine called Claude. Claude is very careful to say things a certain way, so you can think of it as being a little bit more censorious. I think, like if you take a GPT is a little more middle of the road. If you ask it a controversial question, like if you ask us, what is the date of the Exodus? GPT will teach the controversy. It will give you both sides.
Right.
There's some that will say this date and some that say this date, and here's why. And it's fairly even-handed in some ways, but most of them do have baked into them this reinforcement learning so that they answer questions in a way that the company who created the AI prefers.
Yes.
And even the open weight models, when you get the open weights, that means that Facebook releases its weights. You can run it on your own local machine. Even the weights themselves are weighted toward giving the kind of answers that they prefer and what they would call safe answers. And so even the open source models, you cannot escape it. There's an editorializing that happens.
Because it's made by humans is essentially what you're saying.
That's right. Yeah, definitely. I mean, they're all made by humans.
And some are aggressively so, we would say. That is to say, there's some media corporations, for example, that definitely want to steer you to the right-wing answers or left-wing answers. But even those who are aiming to be neutral will fail to be neutral, if I hear you correctly.
Yes, and I think the curriculum is the right model. Think about the AI as being a student. And when you design curriculum, you're trying to make sure that a student has the proper perspective on the field, make sure they have a handle of the controversies in the field. And then if you're in a particular institution with a very firm idea about what the right answer is, you might even steer students toward the right answer as they work through the material. And I think all of there are many students out there right now being trained on massive amounts of data and massive amounts of question and answer pairs, and they're being catechized in a way that's what a catechism is. It's questions and answers. And I think all of these bots are being catechized in different ways, and they will be as biased as our children hopefully are when we raise them to have certain values. And same thing with the bots.
Now, would this imply that we should aim to start Christian AI companies, or get involved in the field so we can influence it and not view it as a dangerous field, but one where we need the leavening influence of Christian faith? Is this the kind of field where it's better for the Christian to get involved with the big players? And it's just a sidebar. We know that the cost of entering AI generation is very high. So the barriers to competition are very high. If 5 Christians said, I'm going to start an AI company, they couldn't possibly find the resources to do so, correct?
Well, I mean, it's like any company. You would have to convince, private equity or
right.
Some bank that you have an idea that will serve people in a way that they're willing to pay for, and so forth.
It'll be profitable in the end, right?
That's right. Or it could be philanthropy. There is a lot of philanthropy out there for building things that don't produce a profit but have some sort of societal value. But you're right. I couldn't do it at my house. I mean, we bought a machine here that has 2 GPUs in the department, and it cost $10,000. Elon Musk just built a supercomputer in Memphis that has 100,000 GPUs. And they are much better than the ones that are in the device that we bought. So you can just imagine the kind of scale and the cost, not to mention the electricity required. It's about the electricity for 10,000 homes to run that system. So it's a very energy intensive system. So yeah, it would be very difficult for anyone to do that. But back to your root question, I do think it's the kind of field where Christians should get involved. Working for the big companies, it could be heartbreaking in the way that working for a big company in any field might be.
Right.
Your influence might be diluted in a lot of ways. Starting a company that serves people well and gives them good content and a good service, that's always helpful for everyone in the world. So I definitely think that there's a place for that. You might have seen recently someone from Catholic Answers created a chat bot called Father Justin that would answer
Okay.
Catholic questions, and
Okay.
so that was pretty fascinating. And of course, it also was offering to perform rites and
Oh, no kidding.
yes,
That's
forgiveness and that sort of thing.
I'm not sure the Catholic Church would approve of that, but you could imagine the Father Justin being trained on the Catholic Catechism that came out in 2001, which is over 1,000 pages.
That's right. Yeah.
And has most of the answers to most of the questions.
That's right. And really, the big models have all that data as well. And if you ask them the question the right way, they usually will give you the answer that you're looking for.
So you could create a theological chat GPT or whatever that works primarily on that operates primarily on the works of Bavinck and Hodge and Calvin, and say this is our theological source. We could call it Calviniana or something like that, and that would work pretty well.
No doubt about it. Just the same way that you can use electricity from a power plant to power any number of things, you can even use the text generated by GPT to create what you're talking about. You could refine the output so that it is limiting itself to the material in the sources you prefer.
Yeah, right. That's
fine tuning. They call it fine tuning.
Yeah, fine tuning. Only Reformed theologians, or
that's right,
or only Anabaptist theologians, for that matter.
That's right. Yeah.
So we're getting into the realm of the benefits, but we should also think about the potential losses. I mean, the view, of course, is that technology almost always makes life a little bit easier for humans, so that, forklifts make it easier than lifting stuff one by one, and trucks are easier than loading materials on a horse cart. So AI is going to do that to some degree, but one of the points people make now is that we're not going to remove backbreaking work that is fundamentally muscle work, but we're going to remove mental work, or the work that we now construe as creative or higher end. What's your conception? Is AI going to remove dirty work or intellectual work? Is it going to help everybody? Is it going to hurt everybody? What's your view of the societal impacts, the economic impacts of AI?
Yes. Well, and I think about 4 or 5 years ago, we definitely would have all probably, if we had been polled, would have said that the kind of truck driving jobs and jobs that require skilled labor might be replaced first. GPT, that was part of the revolution. People realized that it can do intellectual work. And so a lot of people spend their day doing procedural type work, moving paper from one place to another, interpreting one piece of paper, taking an action, and then creating another piece of paper. And those are the kind of things that these models really excel at. So there's lots of kind of procedural work that could be, the need for it could be obviated. So I definitely think in the short term, there could be some displacement of labor in those areas. In fact, they've looked at you probably are familiar with the gig economy, where you can go online to a site like Fiverr and you can offer to write a document for someone for $5. Well, all of the low value writing now is completely missing from the site. They're basically, the prices fell through the bottom. Nobody needs humans to do low value writing. They only need them to do high value writing. And so that even that one site has shown that. So I do think that it's going to, in the short term, do that. I guess the thing about most technologies like farming, the offshoring of manufacturing, sometimes those happen over time, and there's enough time for us to adjust. Maybe in the period of a career, 30 years, we can maybe slowly turn off the spigot for that particular career. But if AI happens fast enough, that's the problem. It'd be harder to adjust to in the short term. So I do think there's going to be some customer service jobs, especially. You're going to be talking to agents on the phone and not know that they're AI very quickly.
Oh, I talked to an AI on the phone the other day, and for an airline, and it was extraordinarily clear I was not talking to a person.
Okay, wow.
They were asking me the most idiotic questions imaginable.
That's great.
So at the end, they said, "How am I doing?" And I said, "Very poorly."
Right. And you wouldn't dare say that to a human, but it's okay to say that.
They didn't identify themselves as non-human, but I'll just say the clues kept on coming in that this was not a real person.
Yes, and that's in itself an ethical issue. Should we disclose when you're dealing with a bot? And some of the proposed legislation does make that a point that you have to disclose when humans are having to interact with an artificial intelligence.
Right. So let me just go back to this for a moment. So what you're saying with regard to the economy is that people are going to probably lose some jobs, and they're not what we're used to losing, if I can put it that way. That is to say, mundane tasks. But I mean, we both probably know people that wrote poems for their beloved. In fact, it's kind of comical in the movie Her, which is sort of the archetypal AI movie. The hero or anti-hero, whatever it might be, writes love letters and poems, and now that job is gone because of AI. with which he fell in love in the movie, not trying to give things away too much.
Yes, yes.
But fairly substantial jobs, we might say, strange jobs, we might say, but fairly substantial jobs could disappear as well as ordinary jobs. But I hate to say it, Jonathan, in some fashion, you're part of this. I mean, what allows you to say, I want to be part of this? I mean, you could have been teaching history of theology, I presume, or been a pastor or just worked in IT. You're part of this.
That's right.
Why do you pursue this? Why do you think it's a good thing
to
be part of this revolution?
That's very interesting. You know, it's funny. There's a whole movement called accelerationism, and it's been around for a while. But the idea is to, delve headlong into developing technology as much as possible. Two of the motivations would be, one of them would be that it's unavoidable, and someone else is going to get there first. That's the other part.
So
of it.
Let's be the good guys. We get there first. That's kind of the AI. We got to get there so the Chinese don't, because they're evil and we're good.
That's right. That's one of the aspects of that.
Align extremely well with Christian theology.
That's right. That's right. But I guess here's the thing. Let's suppose you take all the things you do on a daily basis and you replace 30% of them with AI. All right. And now that frees up some of your time to do other things. I don't believe that it kind of makes your occupation 30% less valuable. I really think you'd be able to invest in people. You'd be able to invest in doing the things that you've always wanted to do when you're having to fill out paperwork and you're having to interpret documents and that sort of thing. So I do think that for a lot of people, it will free them up to do more productive things. So I think that's important.
But Jonathan, I got to tell you, that's what people have always been saying about technology. And the problem with technology is that it seems not to have reduced the work week at all.
Yes,
partly because of the competitive race. And so, because you can deploy artificial intelligence to make your company better than other companies, everybody else is also ready to be a little bit better. And so we're not getting the leisure benefit that was promised, by the way back in 1920, when people said, the machines the manufacturing machines are going to make it possible to have a work week of 20 or 30 hours. Bertrand Russell, one of your favorite philosophers, wrote a long piece on the 20 to 30 hour work week and how it's around the corner. And actually the work week is longer.
Yes. Well, part of that is because we've decided to be more productive. So we've substituted leisure for productivity. And so it's true that, the machines have made us more productive. If we wanted to get behind everyone else who's pursuing productivity, we could have that leisure time if we'd like to. But while we're doing that, all of our fellow humans are moving ahead. They're saying that AI might add the equivalent of the economy of Great Britain to the world economy over the next 5 years. So, that's quite an expansion. So it's the kind of thing, you're right. And I can't really solve the keeping up with the Joneses problem very well. But another thing I was going to say, that if you use it to replace part of your work, you'll start to realize other things you can do with it that might never have occurred to you. Like, for instance, you might
give me an example.
Well, there have been examples of economists making rap songs that will describe economic concepts. You've probably seen some of these, the John Maynard Keynes rap and that sort of thing.
Right.
Well, suddenly, everyone has the ability to make music. Everyone has the ability to make a movie. And maybe you weren't so good at cinematography, but you had a great idea. So it does expand the things that you can do in the world. So, there are creative outlets for everyone now, pretty much. That's a pretty fascinating thing.
Well, one way to put it's a memory enhancer, because a lot of people can learn things so much better if they sing them than if they simply try to recite them.
Yes.
Let me ask you a related question. Since you and I have both studied foreign languages, is it possible that AI is going to become a really good translator?
Yes.
Or is it going to be good enough I'm sure AI is good enough, for example, if you walk into a restaurant in France or Germany or Italy and you don't speak those languages, I'm confident that either we can or soon we'll be able to take a picture of the menu and it'll translate it all back to us.
That's right.
Yes.
It already does that. And I think, the idea of the Star Trek translator where you just sit there and talk naturally with someone almost real time, I do think the technology is already there. It's a product problem at this point. Someone needs to make a nice version of it that's very usable. But AI right now, these generative models, they can translate back and forth from one language to another very, very well. And they do
accurately,
it accurately.
Well, you mean highly accurate.
Accurately, and they don't really base it on a set of rules. They're more like humans that understand the sense of the semantic, the meaning of the language. And so that when they translate, they do a much better job than wooden rules-based translators do. Google at some point, I forget what year it was, but it was in the 2000s, converted from using a rules-based approach to using AI. And that's when all of their accuracy went through the roof and everyone started using the tool more. But AI just spontaneously can even read languages for which it doesn't have very many examples, which to me shows you that humans have a lot of commonalities. We have a similar conceptual world. And so you could probably make up a fake language and tell AI what it's based on, and it could infer the meaning of it, even if it's not, because it understands, even if it's not familiar with your language, just because it understands how language works in general.
Right.
It's fascinating.
Right. Yeah. That's an extremely powerful tool for the good. Of course, we can think of, as Christians, we may think, oh, that would make Bible translation into difficult languages for small people groups, unreached people groups that were, trying to get the Bible in the heart language. And you're saying we're kind of there as soon as somebody comes up with a product that's sufficiently advanced and doesn't cost too much.
Yes, and I did sit on a little panel at the Society for Biblical Literature, and it was full of Bible translators. And it was fascinating because the younger Bible translators were very interested in trying this out. The older Bible translators, there was a real ethical sense that we're giving people less than what they deserve by allowing machines to translate the Bible. They really thought that the kind of human interest and the kind of expertise that they brought to it as humans is what the folks for whom they're translating the Bible deserve. I thought that was amazing. So
but I mean, I think you and I would probably say, AI is going to give an extraordinarily good start to, let's say, translating the New Testament in maybe hours as opposed to years. And then by all means, refine it, make it sing, make it more poetic. If you have taken the time to learn the language and, get the nuances right. If I'm understanding correctly, yes. AI starts us down a path, and then we can build, and we get rid of the mundane things like translating the words for and of and the and so forth, and we just proceed to the more sophisticated elements.
Oh, exactly right. Yes, I agree. That's the model.
Okay, so let's just let me expand this a little bit more. AI can serve us, can take away drudgery. Can it extend our abilities? And of course, you know that professors and educators of all kinds are worried about atrophy. They're worried that the students they have will, instead of learning how to write, let's say a lazy fourth grader whose parents are wealthy, will just tell the AI prompt to write a paper on Cuba at a fifth grade level.
That's right. Yes.
They'll never learn how to write.
That's right.
So how can AI extend our abilities, and how do we keep it from causing atrophy of our abilities?
Yes. And I'm willing to grant that, in this part of the education process, we ought to sequester, children from AI in certain circumstances while they're learning to have those aha moments, where they're learning to use language, because writing is a way of learning to think. But if you're thinking about a professional who's already kind of educated and understands and has written before and has thought through things, imagine being able to read 15 journal articles a day instead of 3. Now, you may quibble with the word read in that context, but imagine being able to load 15 journal articles in and have a discussion with AI about those articles. Does this author discuss X? Because I'm interested in writing an article about X. Are they covering X? It's a bit like a search on steroids where you can actually talk to them. Another thing is that I've used AI.
Can I just pause to make sure everybody understands what you just said? So sometimes when we want to find out what some great thinker has to say about something, we want to read their book. But the truth is, what we want is a really good index where we find out not that the index is, tells us 2 places, but it actually tells us every single place, and even could suggest, hey, if you want to understand what they're saying on page 71 and 114 and 278, you want to start 2 paragraphs earlier.
That's right. And you think of a
for
book.
One more. And you don't have to wade through the book.
That's right. And that's very common. And a book itself is a technology. I mean, the ability to flip through, hold your place and look and compare, it's much more convenient than a scroll. And then from the very beginning, even the earliest printed books in English had indices. So it's amazing to be able to have a shortcut to find out, where does this author speak about this topic? And so you can think of AI as being another advance on that. Does this author ever say anything? I have to admit, I actually used it one time. A colleague said that we made a claim. So I loaded in something that I wrote and asked, did I ever make this claim in this paper? And I was able to satisfy myself that I never made the claim in that way. I even asked, was there anything that would give someone the grounds for claiming that I made the claim? That kind of thing. Oh my
goodness!
So I got very meta with it, and it was very useful to have. So, but all of the models now allow you to they're multimodal, which means they can take in pictures, they can take in PDFs and other kinds of files. So you can upload a journal article, and you can start to inquire of the model what the journal article is about. So that's
and also AI is good at doing things like summarizing notes of a meeting. So you type randomly as people talk, and you're just writing everything down that they say, and you do not have to go back and cull the repetition. AI will do that for you.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And we may not think of it as AI, but it really is the ability to take a transcript, to be able to make a transcript automatically from a meeting. That was one of the earliest triumphs of AI, was to be able to hear me say the word the and actually write THE in text that could be edited. And so that's an extremely time-saving thing for any scholar. You can take your lectures, turn them into a book much more quickly, for instance.
Yeah, it might not still be a very good book because lectures have all kinds of sidebars. I want
Exactly.
to talk to you a little bit about some of the harder things that have to do with AI.
Sure.
Deep fakes, making pictures of people that are embarrassing, make them say things that they would never say, maybe biased comments, hateful comments, and so forth. How do we prevent that from happening, or how do we gain the ability to detect and debunk it when somebody says, oh, you see what a political person so-and-so said, and they didn't say it? What can we
Yes.
do to prevent that? Of course, the answer is you can never completely prevent it, but what can we do about the darkest uses of AI?
Yes, yes, it is a real problem. We just had the election in India, which is largest democracy in the world, and AI played a role in this election with some from candidates speaking from beyond. Well, candidates had people speaking for them from beyond the grave. Candidates speaking in languages that they don't know, but that makes them look like a man of the people and that sort of thing. So it's a fascinating problem. Another thing, we just had the kids taunting classmates by making imagining an embarrassing photo of a classmate using AI for that purpose. I guess like anything like any human behavior that we don't want to incentivize, we can put in disincentives like punishment, that sort of thing. I guess what's interesting about it though is people will be getting sophisticated very quickly. Think about there's been some debate this week about some election pictures. How many people were at the rally? Is this a faked picture of the rally, and so forth? And it starts to be one thing that's interesting is that the fact that AI can do it makes everything a little suspicious. Everyone's always worried now.
Definitely the problem that we envision. We already have a problem with trust that's endemic to our society, and now you can just throw thousands of people into a picture and say, "This is how many people came to my rally," and
That's
amp
right.
up the noise.
Yes. So maybe in some ways it's good because people will become more sophisticated. Epistemologically, they'll realize that I've always been presented someone's take on the world. The news could have always been presenting to me in a certain way. The sad thing about it is that we really do have a crisis of legitimacy. We don't believe what we see. We don't believe unless we see it with our own eyes. Frankly, so it's a problem. I guess one thing, there could be a technological solution. It is possible to, apparently OpenAI has some technique inside that they're experimenting with to predict whether or not generated text came from their engine. Now that's one, and they haven't released it for several reasons. And here's one of the reasons. I think it decreases the value of content. If someone can find out that you generated from OpenAI, and even if you did it for a good reason, maybe your English isn't great and you have great ideas, and you used OpenAI to punch up your grammar a little bit, it would catch you in the dragnet of fakery, right? But the other thing could be that they. So I think those are the two sides of it. Maybe we're differentially impacting people who are using it for improving their English, while also doing some good things. But maybe there's a technological solution that could give us a percentage likelihood that something is fake or not. I don't know. So far, none of that has been very good. Students are always in a war with professors for cheating. For a long time, there have been places where you can order essays and other humans would write them for you. So I don't think it's kind of a new problem that way. I think it's just the scale of that problem has really changed. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with on X. There's X is formerly Twitter. There is a community notes feature. And what happens there is that you do have a crowdsourced ability to make some comments about something that alleges to be that is presenting itself as true. You can make a comment, you can ask other people to comment, and then the notes get voted up democratically, I guess, to a certain point, and then they appear alongside of the tweet to correct misinformation. So that's one.
If the majority has sufficient knowledge, which of course is not always the case.
That's right. And truth is not the result of a vote. I understand, but I'm just trying to give at least some hope that there are some people trying to do some things with that to bring legitimacy to places where it's very difficult. But yeah, I mean, propaganda is a big problem. Now you can make it at scale. You can do customized propaganda. Anything in the past that you wanted to do to persuade people, now you can personalize it. Advertising, propaganda, even just good arguments, putting them in front of people. So it's a very
good
it's a sticky
arguments for a
problem.
bad cause.
That's
what
right.
You mean. Yeah, that's right. Let me do two more things before we call it a good conversation.
Sure,
Number
sure.
one, I want to say I am concerned about all this. I am also concerned about blandness and mediocrity. So you can tell AI, ChatGPT, whatever, to create a sermon on Colossians 3:1-7, and it's going to be accurate, It's going to be pretty good. You say from an evangelical, classical, Orthodox perspective, define what you mean by Orthodox, not Orthodox church, but Orthodox Christian, and it will do a pretty good job, and it will be boring. And the great enemy, I think, today of the church is, of course, lack of belief and hostility to theism. But one of the other problems is that people make Christianity sound kind of boring and dull and predictable. And so you have to kind of keep it creative. I look at my, when I make a text message, if I use an unusual word, my phone doesn't like it and it corrects. If I use the word obfuscate, it's not going to like that. It's going to make it into obscure. Well, obscure and obfuscate are kind of connected, but they're not the same thing. And you give up. You stop using the right word when you're corrected enough because it's just so frustrating. And I'm afraid it's going to homogenize. When I write, I'm already battling my editors. And every time I use a sentence with an odd construction, they're like, this is the wrong sentence. This syntax is awkward. I go, yeah, I wanted awkward syntax because I wanted this sentence not to flow smoothly so that the reader would have to read it 3 times. That was my goal. And you have to fight. Elena Ferrante, who she is, the great Italian novelist. Anyway, people lionize her work and it's great, but she uses non-standard punctuation all the time. It's extremely effective. She puts it in it makes people sound like verisimilitude is there because of the odd punctuation. And AI would never tolerate that.
Yes.
It would correct it all out. And we would lose one of our great genius writers because of evil AI and its opposition to anything. I'm going to stop. Tell me what you think of that.
Yes, I think you're right. Word processing in general has changed the way we write, the way we think, the economy of our writing, the zest, the vigor of our writing. So I definitely think you're right. And look at American architecture. Look at everything looks like Starbucks pretty much. Everything on my college campus now looks like Starbucks. All the new construction looks the same. Red brick, green windows, very, very, very similar. So I do think that it is a problem. Rising above mediocrity is always a challenge. So we've got this good enough engine. How can we use it for great things? Well, let me give a couple of ideas. Let's suppose you're writing a sermon and it's full of zest and you're trying to illustrate a point and you just have not had a life experience or you've not had a thought about how to illustrate the point. That specific question might produce some amazing ideas from GPT. One time I was writing a sentence and I was trying to imply something that I could not say out loud in the context. And I asked it, what did I imply? And it gave me a list of 3 things that I implied and it was spot on the money. So I had successfully implied something without saying it. So I used it like a dialogue partner. So just think of it as a smart grad student sitting at your shoulder, maybe a virtuous parrot on your shoulder. And you can ask it to give you another take on things. You give you an idea here or there. I think that's the right way to use it.
Will you sit next to me as I prepare a sermon sometime when I'm flat out of ideas? Like I got to come up with an illustration about a sad thing that happened that had a good ending, and you're going to help me write the prompt just so.
Well, I remember some of your illustrations from maybe 97 even. You used an illustration about a salad bar one time with a sneeze guard. And now the funny thing is I don't remember what you were illustrating. So that's the sad part. I'm sorry. But I do remember you're using a sneeze guard, a salad bar. And I think for years I carried that illustration with me for whatever concept. It was very, very useful. So you're good at that. You're much better than GPT is right now. But I do think
right now that's the operative word is right now. Yeah,
that's right.
That's funny. All right, let me ask you to do this. Maybe 2 more questions. One is, ordinary Christian, good person who wants to be faithful with their technology. Tell us one reason why we might be concerned about AI, and give us, and you've probably covered this, but give us one reason why we might want to be concerned, and one reason why we should be hopeful about AI, and maybe put it in the concept of, if my child decided to go into AI, I would not be troubled because.
I think maybe the category for concern should be anything that pulls us away from other people. So we are embodied people, body soul nexus. We're rubbing up against each other. When we talk, we vibrate molecules that vibrate the other person's eardrums. I mean, there's a connection there, sitting across a table and eating. So if AI makes it easier not to interact with other people, if we don't have real assistants because we have AI assistants, that's going to be a sad thing. So I do think anything that makes us a little less social, because we're social beings, it's a constitutive part of us that we're going to be, if we're not social, we're a little less than the beings that we're meant to be. So I think that's one part. And that you could say that for a lot of technologies, but I think AI in particular, you might even risk your heart and pour it out to an AI agent and start to have a romantic attachment and that sort of thing. So it could be a dangerous thing.
Or a counselor. You end up telling things to a counselor, an AI counselor who's maybe not going to push back the way you really need it, the way somebody who's reading your I'll put it this way. You could talk to AI and all the words are true, but the person sitting across from you goes, hey, listen, everything you're saying is true, but your body language is all wrong. And I'm sorry, but you're holding something back, or you're pretending to be calm, but your whole body's vibrating lack of calm. AI can't detect that.
That's right. Yeah. Bob Newhart slapping the table and saying, stop it. That will never happen with AI. So that's one thing. So I think that's the thing that worries the most. Things that would dehumanize us, reduce our relationships, I guess, reduce our feasting with one another.
Okay.
That's the goal of life, right? That's the target of all human life is feasting. But then I guess on the good side, though, if your son or daughter is interested in pursuing AI, I mean, most occupations are going to involve AI in some way. Even, for every skill level, you might be installing the sensors in a building that ensure that the building is safe and secure and has the right temperature. Well, that's an AI job in the future because all of those sensors will be supporting the processing of the building's capabilities. And then at the jobs that are very intellectual, all those jobs will be augmented by AI, improving the productivity of people, checking to make sure contracts don't have hidden clauses, a second or a third look at a contract, by AI. It could just be the fact that when you're writing procedural communication, it can check to make sure you're addressing everybody with the right name and not making, mistakes and that sort of thing. So I do think it's going to be a part of every job, no doubt about it. I also think that the data, we won't talk too much about data. Data is one of the things that enabled AI, which there's so much data in the world. And the people that can really understand and use data will be in a better position to not be fooled. They will be in a position to investigate the sources of claims and the ability to know whether something is being based upon data that's biased, data that is incomplete, and so forth. So I just the AI mindset, it gives you a whole mindset about the world. You're going to know that these deliverances of AI don't come magically. They don't come out of the ether. They come from a bunch of training data. It raises your ability to detect fraud, to detect misinformation, and so forth if you're engaged in it.
I'm thinking AI with all of its data gathering would also help us not start businesses that are doomed to fail. We'd say, should I put a restaurant here? And AI says, do not put a restaurant here. All the data indicate that there have been 27 restaurants in this property. 24 of them failed within 18 months. There's a space right over there that you haven't thought of. I mean, AI could do that kind of thing, could it not?
Yes. In fact, on Twitter yesterday, someone posted a problem that one of their clients is having. And the person that posted it is a personal financial planner. And it was in a situation where they had some inheritance and they also had a mortgage. Should they pay it off? Should they invest?
Yes, right.
I presented the scenario to one of the models, and it returned exactly the advice that the financial planner gave to the person. So I thought it was, eventually it will become a little easier to consult experts when that's a little hard right now. Sometimes you have to hire them or retain them. And so I do think it's going to be a benefit, definitely.
It's probably going to do surgery someday, don't you think?
Oh, yes, definitely.
Yes. Yeah, because human hands shake all the time. Tiny, tiny bit. Everybody's hand shakes. So there's lots of reasons to be enthusiastic about it, lots of reasons to be involved in a field that can be very positive. So Jonathan, Dr. Jonathan Barlow, thank you very much for your time. But before you go, I want to ask a couple really basic questions.
Sure.
And basic question number one is, what did Augustine teach you about AI?
Oh, wow.
You wrote about this. I read something you wrote about Augustine, like something like it can help you think the way you write and write the way you think. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a famous quote from Augustine that he said, basically, count me as someone who learns as I write and writes as I learn. So, and there's something really interesting. It's a good question because there's something interesting about this connection between language and knowledge and truth. I mean, God in the Christian tradition, God creates the world using language.
Right.
So there are a lot of skeptics that believe language just isn't good enough. But I don't know. At the root of everything is God speaking in a certain way and bringing the world to be. And so I know bodies are very important too. So I'm not saying that language is all there is, but I do think that these language models are on the right track because language is very important, and we're really constituted by language. That's how we praise. In addition to our actions, that's how we praise is through words.
If you love your child, you hug them and you say "I love you." You do both.
That's right. That's right. Very good.
Well, there's no question Augustine is right. you learn what you think by getting ready to write about it or talk about it. Sometimes people, what do you think about that? I say, well, I'll let me go write about it for a while. And I'll know what I think after I try to write about it, because it forces you to come to clarity.
Yes,
and
I agree.
I think that AI could possibly help us with that. Last question is totally different. I like to ask my people this question. If you could do anything for a year, no obstacles of any kind, no visas, no fees, just anything. No, you don't need to send your dog to the dog sitter. What would you do for 1 year?
Oh, wow. I really like making music. And so if I had just access to a really world-class studio for a year and make an album or 2 or 3, I think that'd be great. Live in
There's a Jonathan Barlow who's a musician. Did you know that?
Really? That's interesting. I think he wrote lyrics for somebody maybe or something. I don't know.
No, I mean, I when I was looking you up to find out a little more extra information, I found Jonathan Barlow, musician, on Amazon. So
okay,
maybe you have a doppelganger out there.
I do. Yeah, I have an album on Spotify. Doc Barlow is my nom de whatever plume, not plume, but nom de whatever. Okay. And so that's my yep. It's a fun. I'm from Mississippi. It's a tradition. Blues. I have a map behind me with all the blues musicians in Mississippi, and so my whole life.
The banjo and
I play guitar and guitar, bass, drums, that kind of thing. So yeah.
Jonathan, it's been a pleasure to be with you. Great to make connection with you after a few years of past.
Yes.
I'm thankful for the work you do at an important institution, one of our great state universities, for which we give thanks in our fair land. Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your impact on so many students like me. I appreciate it.
Thanks. Working with Dan Doriani is a production of the Center for Faith and Work St. Louis. We seek to promote faithfulness in the workplace, in education, in discipleship, and in the stories of believers who've applied their faith at work. If you want to put your faith to work and change your corner of the world, visit our website, the Center for Faith and Work St. Louis. Look for faithandworkstl.org. That's one word. We'll help you start a cohort with like-minded believers who also want to practice their faith at work. This podcast is donor-supported. To keep us going, please donate on our website. Maybe more importantly, you can support us by listening, by subscribing, by sharing, by liking us, by posting us on your favorite platform, or go old school and tell a friend.